Sakura is a 16-year-old high school girl who begins her day standing in the school bathroom, nervously practicing how she will confess her feelings to Nozaki, a boy in her class. After gathering enough courage, she walks to his classroom, feeling anxious and shaky, but at least she manages to tell him something, though not what she truly means. Instead of saying she loves him, she blurts out to Nozaki that she admires him. Nozaki completely misunderstands her words and believes she is simply a fan of his secret work as a manga artist, so he calmly hands her his autograph. Sakura is left puzzled and embarrassed, and she tries to explain that her real intention was to tell him she likes him deeply and hopes to stay with him forever. Nozaki, however, does not catch her meaning and instead sees a chance to get some help with his manga. Without hesitation, he invites Sakura to come to his apartment to be his assistant. Even though Sakura feels it might not be right to be there since everything started with a misunderstanding, she convinces herself to stay and help him, partly because she does not want other girls to take her place by his side. She ends up spending the whole afternoon and late into the night helping him color his manga panels, and by the time she heads home, she is completely worn out. Just before going inside, she takes out the autograph he gave her earlier and looks at it closely. That is when she notices something strange. The signature says, Sakiko Yumino. The name feels familiar to her, and she quickly remembers seeing it before. Rushing up to her room, she searches through her stack of girls' manga, and to her shock, she realizes that all those manga she loves so much were written by Sakiko Yumino, who is, in reality, Nozaki himself. The next day at school, knowing his secret, Sakura starts to admire him even more, amazed that her quiet classmate is the creator of the stories that made her laugh and cry. After classes, she visits his apartment again, this time not just to help, but also to brainstorm ideas for his new manga. Before they start, Sakura asks Nozaki why he sometimes comes to school looking like he has been in a fight, but he calmly tells her it is nothing bad, just stress. This answer disappoints Sakura slightly because she had imagined him as a tough boy who defended others or fought troublemakers. But even so, her words spark an idea in Nozaki's mind. He begins imagining a story about a thug who is kind to everyone on the surface, but secretly involved in bad things. Hearing this, Sakura suggests adding some romance, proposing that the thug could meet a girl while on a bike ride. Nozaki doubts that a bike ride could ever lead to love, so the following day he takes Sakura out on his bike to see if any romantic feelings develop. Unfortunately, the outing is a disaster. Sakura feels awkward and sad because she feels nothing during the ride, and Nozaki becomes exhausted from pedaling so much. Still, he turns this failure into something useful, learning what not to do for his story. Using that experience, he crafts a new chapter that turns out to be a huge success when it is released. When Sakura reads the finished manga, she is happy and proud to see how well he turned the idea into a story. Later that same day, after school, they work together again on another chapter. As Sakura looks over the new sketches, she is amazed at how well Nozaki understands girls in his writing and starts to wonder if he has ever been in love or had experience with girls in real life. Unable to hold back her curiosity, she asks him directly if he has ever loved someone, and he immediately says no. He explains that his talent for writing girls so convincingly comes from listening to and advising his female friends over the years. After that, Nozaki turns the question back on Sakura, asking if she loves someone. Sakura hesitates but then quietly admits that she does, and that when she confessed her feelings, the boy misunderstood her and instead made her his assistant. She thinks deeply about it for the rest of the evening, and even on the train ride home, she cannot stop replaying everything in her mind. That night, she finds it hard to sleep because her heart is so full of mixed emotions. The following afternoon, after classes end, Sakura sees Nozaki outside her house, crouching down and playing gently with some stray cats. The scene warms her heart and makes her imagine a peaceful, happy moment with him, and she feels a sudden surge of courage. She walks toward him, determined to finally confess her true feelings once and for all. Another boy named Mikoshiba, and their strange yet tender connection continues to unfold. But when she opens her mouth, the same words escape. I admire you. Nozaki, still misunderstanding her true meaning, simply smiles and gives her another autograph, leaving Sakura completely devastated. She can do nothing but cry quietly, feeling like she has once again missed her chance to let him know how she truly feels. The next day at school, as if none of this ever happened, Nozaki cheerfully introduces Sakura to Nozaki, not realizing she is talking about him, tells her that it is probably best for her to stay away from that boy. Sakura does not respond, but inside she feels torn, because she knows exactly who that boy is. Mikoshiba, besides being Nozaki's close friend, also works as his assistant, and his personality makes quite an impression on everyone around him. He is often proud and a little full of himself, mainly because being Nozaki's assistant gives him a sense of importance, and in some ways, he enjoys feeling superior to other students. The girls at school admire him a lot, showering him with compliments and attention, and many dream of being his girlfriend. But Mikoshiba only looks at them as overexcited fans who do not really matter to him. Later on, when Sakura visits Nozaki's apartment to help out, Mikoshiba is also there doing his usual assistant work. While they work, Mikoshiba quietly assumes that Sakura is not skilled and thinks she will probably need his help. However, to his surprise, she proves him wrong by continuing her tasks smoothly and efficiently without asking for anything, showing she is far better at the job than he first imagined. Mikoshiba ends up sitting idle, watching in disbelief as Sakura handles everything on her own, which leaves him embarrassed. Seeing Mikoshiba not participating, Nozaki steps in and asks Sakura to try and involve Mikoshiba by asking him for help, even though Sakura herself does not need it. Because Nozaki is her boss and she wants to follow his instructions, Sakura politely asks Mikoshiba to join in, and though he is reluctant, they end up working together simply because Nozaki requested it. After working for a while, the three of them take a short break and turn on the television, where they find a show called Draw From Memory. Inspired by the fun premise of the show, Sakura suggests they try the same game in real life. They eagerly accept, and the three begin sketching different objects and characters from memory to see who draws the best. They laugh and compete while drawing, and after a series of drawings, it becomes clear that Sakura stands out the most with her neat and lively sketches. However, Mikoshiba also surprises everyone. Even though he is not exactly skilled in drawing, he has a natural talent for adding fine details and beautiful decorations, which impresses Sakura when he enhances one of the drawings on the table with delicate touches. The following day, Nozaki starts working on a new manga chapter and tries to come up with a new male character, but he struggles because he has no suitable model to base the character on. He turns to Sakura for help and asks if she knows someone who could inspire him. Sakura explains that she does not have male friends who could help, but she does have a friend named Yuzuki, who might be useful as a model because she is extremely energetic and athletic. We later see Yuzuki sprinting at full speed through the school halls as she tries to escape a teacher's punishment, showing just how lively she can be. But Yuzuki's personality is not as simple as it seems. She describes herself as kind and generous, someone who loves helping others. But her actions often tell a very different story. For example, when another student shyly gives her a small gift, Yuzuki's overly blunt honesty ends up hurting the other girl's feelings instead of making her happy. During a physical education class, Yuzuki again reveals another side of herself by dominating all the activities and refusing to let other girls join in, making it clear she can be selfish and inconsiderate. Watching this, Nozuki becomes curious about Yuzuki's true personality and wants to understand her better for his manga. When Yuzuki is punished by a teacher and given the chore of delivering a stack of papers to the science classroom, Nozaki decides to walk with her, hoping to talk to her and study her behavior. As they make their way down the hall, Yuzuki confidently tells him that she is a good person who always offers help to others, but Nozaki notices the opposite in her actions as she disrupts others' work instead of helping. When they reach the science classroom, she suddenly excuses herself, claiming she will come back to help him carry the papers, but she never returns, leaving all the work to Nozaki. Later that day, Nozaki meets up with Sakura again, and as they talk about Yuzuki while heading toward the school gates, a beautiful, angelic singing voice reaches their ears. The voice is so powerful and pure that it stops them in their tracks, sounding like something from an opera performance. Intrigued, Nozaki follows the sound to the music club room, curious to see who could sing so wonderfully. When he opens the door, he is stunned to discover that the person behind the magnificent singing is none other than Yuzuki herself. This unexpected discovery leaves him speechless and more confused than ever, and he quietly concludes that Yuzuki's personality is far too complex for him to fully understand. One afternoon, during a break between classes, Mikoshiba decides to help Sakura find inspiration for a new character she is trying to create, so he introduces her to a girl named Kashima, who is famously known throughout the school as the Prince. Kashima earned this nickname because she is elegant, charming, and treats everyone, boys and girls alike, with kindness and courtesy, winning admiration from almost everyone. At first, Kashima and Mikoshiba used to be rivals, always competing to outshine each other in everything, but over time they became good friends despite their rivalry. After being introduced, Kashima greets Sakura warmly, but in her overly friendly way, she ends up putting Sakura in an awkward spot in front of Nozaki by asking personal questions about her connection with him and Mikoshiba. Both Sakura and Mikushima instantly grow nervous. because they do not want Kashima to know that they secretly help Nozaki with his manga, so they keep quiet. Shortly after, Kashima glances at her watch and casually says she is late for theater club but decides not to go, only to be dragged there moments later by the strict theater club director Hori, who arrives to pull her away to practice. Later that day, back at Nozaki's apartment, Sakura and Mikoshima are working as usual when Sakura suddenly notices something odd on the manga panels. There are two strange signatures, one shaped like a cat and another shaped like a pair of underwear. She is startled and begins to suspect that some strange or even perverted girl might be secretly helping Nozaki, but she does not want to jump to conclusions. The following day, determined to solve the mystery, she begins asking around. First, she questions Yuzuki, but Yuzuki's sarcastic response makes it clear she is not involved. Not long after, Kashima appears and asks Sakura for some help with theater club work, so Sakura follows her to the theater. Once there, Sakura ends up painting props and stage items for an upcoming play, quietly working as Hori hands her one task after another. She accepts all the work without complaint, but when Hori gives her a final piece of wood to paint, she notices the exact same cat-shaped signature on it. Realizing this might be the answer she has been searching for, Sakura tries to speak to Hori right away, but he is already chasing after Kashima, who is trying to avoid her duties, leaving Sakura frustrated. Refusing to let the chance slip by, Sakura stops Kashima from leaving, and then quickly finds Hori alone. She asks him directly if the cat signature belongs to him and also mentions the underwear-shaped signature. To her relief, Hori admits that both are his, which makes Sakura feel much better knowing the mysterious marks were not from some unknown girl. After chatting for a while, Sakura and Hori end up getting along and becoming friends. The following day, Sakura goes to Nozaki's apartment as usual and is surprised to see Hori there. She asks him why he has come, and he explains that he has asked Nozaki for help in writing a good script for his next play. That afternoon, the three of them try to work together, but they cannot come up with anything useful, and their brainstorming drags on into the next day. While they are still discussing it in the school hallway, Kashima overhears them and immediately asks Sakura what kind of relationship Hori has with Nozaki. Satsura cannot reveal the truth that they are secretly working together on a script, so she quickly lies and says that the two boys are hiding some secret. This only makes Kashima jealous, and she storms up to Hori demanding to know who he thinks is cuter, her or Nozaki. Hori bluntly answers that Nozaki is more attractive, which leaves Kashima heartbroken. Upset, she hugs Sakura tightly to console herself. After classes end, Sakura gently asks Kashima how she really feels about Hori, and Kashima admits that she feels he is someone very special to her, someone she could even imagine marrying one day. This gives Sakura an idea, and later she hurries to Nozaki and Hori to share her inspiration, a script for the play that takes place at a wedding. They decide to try acting it out, and Sakura and Hori begin performing the characters. At first it goes awkwardly, but Sakura gives it her all, and eventually delivers her lines with so much feeling that both Hori and Nozaki are impressed by her performance. Meanwhile, Mikoshiba, who has been secretly watching from the sidelines, is suddenly dragged into the performance by Nozaki, who insists he take part. Despite his reluctance, Mikoshiba performs so well that Nozaki is finally able to piece together a complete and satisfying script. Later, Nozaki proudly hands the finished script to Hori, completing their project and leaving Sakura amazed at how an afternoon of confusion, drama, and unexpected talent ended up producing something wonderful. One day, Sakura and Mikoshiba are once again at Nozaki's apartment, quietly helping him with his manga, as they usually do. When their work is finally done, they all take a break to relax. During this time, Mikoshiba suddenly asks Nozaki if he can stay over for the night, and Nozaki calmly agrees, which makes Sakura unexpectedly excited, because she imagines spending more time with both of them. Curious about what they plan to do besides just sleeping, she eagerly asks Mikoshiba. He tells her that when it is just him and Nozaki, they usually talk about girls, or rather, he asks Nozaki for advice on how to deal with them since he himself is terrible at that. Sakura leaves after hearing this, but as soon as she is gone, Mikoshiba's lack of skill becomes clear again. Even when he plays dating games on his handheld console, he cannot interact properly with the game's girls either. This sparks memories for Mikoshiba of how he has always struggled to talk to real girls and even fictional ones in games. But despite constant failure, he never gave up. Over time, his obsession with dating games turned him into an expert at charming virtual girls, though he still has no idea how to manage real-life conversations. Back in the present, Mikoshiba continues his game when Nozaki comes back into the room and pauses, clearly unsure whether to stay or leave. Mikoshiba, hoping to share his hobby, convinces Nozaki to try playing. Nozaki creates a player character in the game and, in a strange twist, names her after the heroine of his own manga. As he plays, he treats the game's girls coldly, rejecting every romantic option, which frustrates Mikoshiba. Realizing the mistake, Mikoshiba encourages him to start over and pick a different name. This time, Nozaki chooses a character that looks suspiciously like Sakura, making Mikoshiba wonder if Nozaki has secret feelings for her. However, even with this new character, Nozaki fails repeatedly, because he keeps making wrong choices in the game. Desperate, he decides to call Sakura for advice. Sakura is thrilled that Nozaki is calling her and feels happy that he might need her help. But before she can say anything, he abruptly hangs up, leaving her puzzled, yet pleased. Nozaki keeps trying to win over the in-game girl, but fails again and again, so Mikoshiba suggests trying to talk to Tomoda, a side character in the game who is known as the main character's loyal best friend. At first, Nozaki is hesitant, imagining that Tomoda might betray him, but once he interacts with Tomoda, he is amazed to discover that Tomoda has always been a faithful friend, offering advice and support for years to help the main character succeed in love. This revelation deeply touches both Nozaki and Mikoshiba, and after finishing the game, they feel inspired to create a new love story centered on Tomoda. Reading through the game manual for inspiration, they decide that Tomoda's perfect love interest should be the main protagonist, and with that idea in mind, they spend the entire night drawing and creating this new story. When Sakura returns the next day, she is stunned to find both boys collapsed on the floor, exhausted after working all night, with pages of their new love story scattered around them. Later that day, Mikoshiba tries to boast to Sakura that he's actually great at dealing with girls, claiming that his dating game experience makes him a professional. Curious, Sakura asks if his so-called skills with game characters help him in real life. Mikoshiba does not answer directly with words. Instead, when they arrive at school, he walks into the building surrounded by several girls, trying to interact confidently with them. But this confident act does not last, because not long after, Mikoshiba secretly sends a private message to Sakura, begging her to keep the girls away from him, because he feels completely uncomfortable. Despite his panic, this scene convinces the other boys at school that Mikoshiba must be a real ladies' man, and they start asking him for advice on dating, even inviting him to a couples event. He agrees on the spot, but soon after, he regrets it, realizing he has no idea how to handle girls, so once again, he turns to Nozaki for help. At Nozaki's apartment, they start practicing different couple scenarios to prepare, and Sakura joins them soon after, hoping to help. However, their practice session quickly turns ridiculous and confusing, with the three of them acting out situations and even pretending to be girls in the apartment's bathroom, without reaching any useful conclusions. Finally, Mikoshiba decides to give up, and asks Kashima to go to the event in his place. When Kashima shows up and the boys who invited Mikoshiba see her, they are shocked at first, but quickly feel relieved, believing that since she is a girl, she will not ruin their chances with the other girls at the event. To their bad luck, Kashima ends up stealing all the attention for herself, charming everyone around her and leaving the boys who planned everything completely out of the running. A few days later, Sakura visits Nozaki's apartment by herself to help with his manga work as usual, when suddenly Nozaki receives a call from his editor who says he will be stopping by soon. Hearing this, Nozaki quickly begins cleaning and straightening up the place to welcome his editor properly, describing him as a mature and serious person. This makes Sakura nervous because she imagines his editor might be an elegant older woman with a special connection to Nozaki, and that thought makes her heart sink a little. However, when the door finally opens and the editor appears, Sakura is both surprised and relieved to see that he is simply an overweight adult man named Ken. At first, she feels a sense of relief, but then a touch of sadness creeps in when she notices how Ken treats Nozaki almost coldly, barely acknowledging him or giving him praise. After Ken leaves, Sakura cannot help but tell Nozaki that his editor seems to belittle him. To her surprise, Nozaki shakes his head and explains that this is not true at all, showing her messages from Ken that arrive almost instantly whenever Nozaki sends him something, proving that Ken is fully supportive and happy to work with him. Nozaki also tells her that he much prefers an editor like Ken to his previous one, a man named Mayuno, who was arrogant, unhelpful, and full of ridiculous ideas. He recalls how every time Mayuno called to talk about new manga ideas, Nozaki would get frustrated because the suggestions were so obvious and nonsensical that they only made him stressed. On top of that, Mayuno had a strange habit of drawing raccoons into every single panel of Nozaki's manga, something that Nozaki absolutely hated. When Sakura sees those raccoon-doodled panels for herself, She is also unimpressed and thinks it looks silly. The following day at school, Sakura rushes up to Nozaki excitedly to tell him that she has found a new manga with that same raccoon drawing, and to her surprise, the manga is actually very good. Even though the main character is a raccoon, the story has a deep and chilling ending full of mystery and suspense, which amazes them both. Looking at the name of the artist, they see it as someone called Yumeko. Later, after class, they happen to meet this artist in person, and they are surprised to discover she is none other than Nozaki's neighbor, who lives just below his apartment. Yumeko cheerfully invites them to spend the afternoon in her apartment, and they happily accept. Once inside, the three of them start talking about Mino, and Yumeko reveals that many of the ideas for her manga actually came from him as well. She begins showing them other ideas that Mino had given her, and almost all of them are ridiculous or useless, which makes them laugh and criticize his work openly. While they are still talking, Mino himself arrives unexpectedly, saying he came to pick up some things, but really wanting to offer Yumeko more ideas. The moment he notices Nozaki, he starts teasing him, and the atmosphere becomes so uncomfortable that Nozaki and Sakura decide to leave. On the way back, Nozaki sends Ken a message to say he is thankful to have him as his editor, and Ken replies right away, saying he is happy to keep working with Nozaki and advising him to keep trying his best. This makes Nozaki smile with relief, grateful that he no longer has to deal with someone like Mino. Still, things are not perfect, and a small argument begins between Ken and Nozaki over the phone. Ken tells him that in his recent chapters, the female lead does not show clear emotions in any panel, and no matter how many times Ken asks what the character is supposed to be feeling, Nozaki cannot give him an answer. Ken advises him to study women more closely and try to understand what emotions he wants the heroine to express. Following this advice, the next day, Nozaki decides to act as if he himself is the female character, hoping to experience emotions directly. His first attempt is by cooking and handing out homemade food to his classmates, thinking it might stir some feelings in him. But all he feels is a simple satisfaction from their reactions, nothing deeper. Later, he spots Kashima being crowded by several girls, so he quickly grabs a nearby cart, lifts her onto it, and dashes away with her to escape, eventually hiding until the girls give up searching. Even though the rescue works perfectly, Nozaki feels no special emotion from it either, leaving him frustrated. By the end of the day, he gives up on his experiments, goes home exhausted, and calls Ken to admit that he still cannot describe the emotions of his female character. He apologizes and says he needs more time to observe and study emotions better, showing just how seriously he is taking his work, despite the confusion in his heart. One day, while Sakura is working on the manga with Nozaki, she decides to play some opera music in the background to make the atmosphere more cheerful and lively. As the powerful voice fills the room, she tells Nozaki that the singer they are listening to is Yuzuki. The moment Nozaki hears that name, he reaches over and stops the music immediately, explaining that he would rather work in silence than listen to her sing. It is not that he dislikes opera itself. Yuzuki's voice is beautiful and strong, but to him, her singing is like the call of a siren from ancient stories, a voice that sounds sweet but ultimately leads sailors to their doom, and he feels that Yuzuki gives off the same dangerous vibe. This idea seems funny at first, but later events almost prove him right, because not long after we see Yuzuki actually hitting Wakamatsu, one of Nozaki's close friends, with little concern for his feelings. A little while later, Wakamatsu visits Nozaki and confides in him that he has been unable to sleep lately, constantly anxious and stressed because of Yuzuki's rough behavior and sudden blows. Hearing this, Nozaki feels sorry for him and offers to let Wakamatsu stay over at his apartment so he can finally get some rest. But only on one condition, that Wakamatsu also helps him with his manga while he is there. Wakamatsu quickly agrees, hoping at least he can get one peaceful night of sleep. Ironically, as soon as he is in Nozaki's apartment and hears Yuzuki's recorded singing playing softly in the background, he immediately drifts off into a deep and calm sleep. It surprises everyone, and the following day, Wakamatsu approaches Nozaki again, asking if he can have that same recording so he can sleep at home just as well as he does that night. At first, Nozaki is hesitant, unsure if it is a good idea to give it to him, but Wakamatsu promises to help more with the manga if he does. In the end, Nozaki gives him the pen drive with Yuzuki's song on it. However, this simple gesture ends up creating a strange emotional problem for Wakamatsu. On one hand, he adores the beautiful, soothing voice that now helps him sleep so peacefully every night, but on the other hand, he still hates the way Yuzuki treats him in real life, with all her teasing and hitting. These mixed feelings make him confused, and after yet another unpleasant run-in with her, Nozaki tries to help by suggesting that Wakamatsu talk things out with Yuzuki directly and clear the air. But instead of following Nozaki's sensible advice, Wakamatsu decides to take tips from a romance manga he has been reading, thinking it will make the conversation more dramatic and effective. So he asks Yuzuki to meet him on the school balcony, imagining a heartfelt scene where he can tell her how he feels. When they finally meet though, things go completely wrong. Yuzuki shows no interest in anything Wakamatsu is saying, barely reacting to his words, while Wakamatsu, growing nervous and upset, blurts out that he hates how she treats him and even says some things that might hurt her feelings. Yuzuki, however, does not even flinch or look bothered, which only makes him more flustered. Embarrassed and unsure of what to do next, Wakamatsu tries to end the moment by handing her a pair of gloves as if it is a meaningful gesture, then quickly leaves, leaving Yuzuki as calm as ever. The next day during class, Sakura suddenly receives an urgent message from Nozaki. Worried, she immediately packs up her things and rushes to his apartment. When she arrives, she finds him lying in bed with a fever, clearly very sick and unable to work. A short while later, Wakamatsu and Hori also show up, having received the same message by mistake. But since they are there, Nozaki weakly asks them to help him finish his manga before the deadline. Although they are eager to help, none of them really know what to do, because they have never handled Nozaki's part of the work before. Still, they do their best. Sakura and Hori start by cutting out panels, but their cuts are uneven and sloppy, which wastes time. Meanwhile, Wakamatsu tries to be useful by making tea for everyone and even attempts to draw a few panels. But when Sakura and Hori look at his sketches, they immediately reject them because they are so poorly done. Even with these setbacks, the three continue to try their hardest, occasionally going to Nozaki's room to ask him what kind of emotions the character should be showing in each panel. But Nozaki, still groggy and weak, gives explanations that are vague and unclear, so each person interprets the expressions in their own way. By the time they finish, the work is far from perfect and the panels look mismatched, but despite that, all three feel proud of themselves for managing to complete it at all. When their frantic work is finally over, Sakura gently prepares a bowl of hot soup for Nozaki and walks into his room to give it to him. Just as she is about to hand him the soup, he suddenly wakes up, startling her so badly that she nearly spills it, ending the long and hectic day with a surprise that leaves her heart racing. The following day, once Nozaki begins to recover from his illness, he carefully looks over the work his friends have done while he is resting. Instead of getting angry and shouting at them for the messy and confusing story they have created, he calmly decides it is better to simply contact his editor and ask for an extension. A few days later, when Sakura finishes her classes and is heading out of the school gates, she spots Nozaki standing alone, looking a little lost. She walks up to him and asks what he is doing there, and he admits that he isn't doing anything in particular. He has finished his classes and his work and now has nothing else planned. He even confesses that he doesn't really have any hobbies to fill his time. Hoping to cheer him up and secretly wanting to spend more time with him, Sakura invites him to take a walk around the mall with her, pretending that it is just to help him find a hobby, though in truth she is excited at the idea of it being like a date. Sadly, the entire outing turns into a disappointment for her. As soon as they arrive at the mall, Nozaki's mind drifts back to his manga, and almost every activity they try somehow circles back to his work. At one point, he even decides to try on a sailor school uniform, thinking it will help him see how it might look on the female lead in his story. But because Nozaki is tall and broad-shouldered, the small uniform looks ridiculous on him, barely fitting at all. While they are still wandering the mall, they unexpectedly run into Mikoshiba, who is shopping for collectible action figures of 2D anime girls. This awkward encounter becomes even worse when Nozaki, still caught up in his ideas, asks Mikoshiba to try on the sailor uniform too. Mikoshiba is so embarrassed and frustrated by the request that he angrily tosses both Nozaki and Sakura into the air, creating a chaotic scene. After recovering from the incident, Sakura leads Nozaki to the bookstore in the mall so she can buy some supplies for her art club, and he goes along with her. Together they end up buying quite a few items, and after finishing their shopping, they head home. The whole day has been clumsy and far from romantic, leaving Sakura feeling disappointed. She has imagined a lovely date with Nozaki, but instead it turns into another strange day centered around his manga. To her surprise though, Nozaki suddenly invites her to have dinner at his place, and her spirits lift immediately. She happily agrees, thinking this might finally feel like a real date. That evening, she sits at his table and eats the meal he has cooked especially for her, enjoying the moment despite her earlier disappointment. However, after dinner, Nozaki hands her a gift, and when she opens it, she realizes it is the same sailor uniform he has bought at the mall. Her heart sinks as she quickly understands that he has given it to her not as a romantic gesture, but because he wants her to model it for him as inspiration for his manga. She has no intention of doing that, feeling both embarrassed and frustrated. Luckily, at that moment, Mikoshiba arrives, and Nozaki immediately turns to him instead, asking him to model the outfit. To Sakura's relief, Mikoshiba reluctantly agrees, and she is spared from wearing the uniform. The next day, inspired by what she has seen, Sakura jokingly asks Nozaki to come and model for her art club, since he has managed to model so confidently the night before. Surprisingly, Mikoshiba is hesitant at first, but after being persuaded by the eager girls in the art club, he agrees to model for them as well. That evening at home, Nozaki prepares himself for his modeling session by practicing different poses, using his collection of action figures. But because all of his figures are of 2D anime girls, the poses he practices end up looking very feminine, which makes him feel a little awkward about his preparation. The next day, however, he arrives at the art club ready and willing to help. To everyone's surprise, he does a great job as a model, holding each pose as instructed by the girls, though remaining perfectly still for such long periods eventually becomes tiring. After several poses, Mikoshiba feels exhausted and starts thinking about leaving, but he isn't sure how to excuse himself. To his relief, Nozaki arrives at the club just then, and Mikoshiba thinks he has come to help him get out of the session, but instead, things turn upside down. Nozaki, rather than helping him, joins in the modeling session and even takes charge, asking all the girls to model alongside Mikoshiba, while he sits down and starts drawing, turning Mikoshiba into the club's sole model. After everything is done, the girls thank Mikoshiba warmly for his effort, and he can't help but feel appreciated. Feeling proud, he arrogantly declares that he will be willing to model for them as many times as they want, trying to sound confident and charming. Yet later on, he regrets those words, realizing that he has a bad habit of saying things he doesn't truly feel, only to please others, leaving him with mixed emotions about his own behavior. On another day entirely, Kashima approaches Mikoshiba and tells him that Hori has been acting strangely around her lately. She notices that he seems colder and more distant than usual and wonders if she has done something wrong. Mikoshiba listens, but there is actually a reason for Hori's behavior. A few days earlier, Hori had been at Nozaki's apartment and borrowed a shoujo manga filled with sweet, romantic scenes. The next day, that very manga accidentally ended up in Kashima's hands when Hori tossed her his backpack without realizing the manga was still inside. Curious, Kashima opened it and was shocked by what she saw. The story was so sugary and tender that she couldn't imagine anyone taking it seriously. For a moment, she assumed the owner must be some lonely boy secretly longing for affection, but when she checked the name inside, she was stunned to see that it belonged to Hori. Later, still puzzled, she told Mikoshiba about what she had found. Together, they talked through one of the romantic scenes in the manga, laughing and debating the plot. Kashima couldn't make sense of the story's main romance. To her, the female lead seemed silly for admiring the male lead so blindly. This confusion led her to bring the subject up with Nozaki, hoping for clarity, but instead of explaining the love story, Nozaki just talked about how he drew the characters and the challenges of making that particular manga, which wasn't helpful at all. Hours later, during a rehearsal for the theater club, Kashima noticed something unexpected. Hori actually seemed to enjoy playing the role of the princess on stage. After practice ended, she teasingly asked him what kind of skirt he thought would suit her, but she was really asking because she was thinking about him in that role. Somehow that skirt ended up in Hori's locker, which left him confused and irritated. Things only got worse when, during casting for leading roles, Kashima loudly suggested that Hori was the perfect choice to play the princess, which pushed his patience too far and made him throw a handful of markers at her in frustration. Kashima didn't stop there. Over the next few days, she kept secretly placing different pieces of female clothing in Hori's locker, insisting that he was destined to be the princess. This constant teasing built up Hori's annoyance even further. The following day at Nozaki's apartment, Hori was helping with the manga work alongside Sakura and Wakamatsu, but he was struggling badly. Every time he tried to draw backgrounds, he would add too many panels or details and have to start over. Nozaki tried to encourage him by explaining that he too had made many mistakes with backgrounds in his early days, but still managed to win a Namakura mangaka contest. Even with those kind words, Hori's work didn't improve much. When Nozaki demonstrated how to fix things, his own attempt was even worse. His drawings had strange, warped perspectives, and to patch them up, he simply placed boxes over the characters to balance out the proportions. Hori was frustrated and complained loudly about this odd solution. Hoping to help, Nozaki later asked Kashima for advice, and she suggested using photos as references for better perspectives. Following her advice, Nozaki set up Kashima and Hori on stage and took their photo to use as a guide. The picture turned out nicely, but Nozaki soon became fixated on the height difference between Hori and Sakura. Instead of adjusting the drawing properly, he once again resorted to covering parts of the image with boxes to make them match, which irritated Hori all over again. Later that evening, Hori mentioned to Kashima that he planned to stay late at Nozaki's house to work. Hearing this, Kashima briefly imagined herself learning how to draw so she could also stay late at her beloved's side. However, this thought didn't bring her any closer to him. The next day during theater practice, Hori was so exhausted from all his work that he nodded off for a few seconds in the middle of rehearsal. When he woke up, the first thing he saw was yet another of those annoying boxes, and in a flash of irritation, he swung his arm, knocking the box away. In the process, Kashima lost her balance and fell, and Hori himself collapsed back into sleep. Seeing him sprawled on the floor, Kashima couldn't help but smile softly and, despite all their conflicts, still saw him as a delicate princess. Feeling protective, she decided to play the role of a prince herself. In a humorous and over-the-top gesture, she placed a horse mask over her head, lifted Hori up, and began carrying him toward the infirmary. As they moved through the halls, Hori woke up groggily, only to see someone in a horse mask carrying him, which startled and confused him so much that he almost panicked. Once they arrived and she removed the mask, he was surprised to see Kashima's familiar face, and despite all the teasing and their arguments, he felt touched by her gesture. This strange yet tender moment seemed to inspire Hori because afterward he appeared more motivated and energetic in his work, and later he even started writing a new love story inspired by the odd but unforgettable experience of being carried through the halls by Kashima. On a rainy afternoon, Sakura finds herself stranded at school, frustrated because she forgot to bring her umbrella and cannot get home without getting drenched. Just when she wonders what to do, Nozaki shows up and she feels a wave of relief, until he sheepishly admits that he also forgot his umbrella, leaving them both stuck in the same predicament. Trying to be considerate, Nozaki offers his jacket as makeshift shelter for Sakura, but the rain is coming down so hard that within moments the jacket is completely soaked through, forcing them to retreat back inside the school and wait for the storm to pass. As they sit together, Nozaki pulls out his notebook and begins to jot down ideas, clearly inspired by their current situation and turning it into possible scenes for his manga. While he is lost in thought, Yuzuki suddenly appears, cheerfully handing Sakura an umbrella before dashing off without another word. Grateful, Sakura and Nozaki head out into the rainy streets together, sharing the single umbrella. Their walk home is anything but smooth. Nozaki shifts the umbrella in a way that accidentally gets Sakura wet, then Sakura splashes into a puddle and soon after, a passing car sprays both of them with a wave of muddy water. Despite the series of mishaps, Sakura treasures the time spent under the umbrella with Nozaki, letting her imagination run wild with romantic daydreams about what it would be like to stay by his side forever. Just as she is enjoying the moment, her fantasy is abruptly broken when Nozaki casually mentions that he left his laundry hanging outside in the rain, snapping her back to reality. Later, after finally reaching home, Sakura warms herself with a hot cup of tea, trying to find peace after the chaotic walk. But her calm is short-lived when Nozaki appears, holding the infamous sailor uniform he bought earlier, eagerly suggesting that she try it on and model for him. Flustered and embarrassed, Sakura quickly refuses, firmly rejecting the idea. A few days later, the two of them meet up again at Yumiko's house to go over their recent manga chapters and look for new inspiration. But they are met with a familiar frustration. Every single draft is filled with random raccoons because of Maino's constant meddling. Determined to fix this, Nozaki urges Sakura to confront Maino directly, or at least argue more forcefully with him. But Sakura confesses that while she often complains to him over the phone, she always ends up giving in. This is obvious when she shows Nozaki her work, where all her original dialogue has been drastically altered by Maino to suit an adult audience. Hearing this, Nozaki becomes irritated and insists that she should not allow herself to be pushed around so easily. As if on cue, Mei-uno calls Yumiko during their meeting, giving Sakura a perfect opportunity to stand her ground, but once again she cannot bring herself to oppose him and ends up going along with his suggestions, leaving Nozaki visibly disappointed. Hoping to outsmart Maino, Nozaki suggests that Sakura try reverse psychology by making raccoons the main focus of her stories, thinking this might annoy Maino and make him drop the idea. To their surprise, this backfires completely. Maino is delighted by this new direction and showers Sakura with praise for hours. Sakura, tired of his compliments, tries another strategy and creates a raccoon character with a cold, emotionless personality, but this too fails when she unexpectedly becomes attached to the character herself. Watching her struggle, Nozaki decides to reach out to his own editor, Ken, asking for advice on how to inject more humor and fantasy into his manga so that it can stand out from Yumiko's work. Unfortunately, Ken dismisses most of his suggestions, telling him they are not strong enough. Feeling frustrated but still eager to impress Sakura, Nozaki makes one last attempt by sketching out characters dressed in raccoon costumes, hoping she will enjoy them. Instead, Sakura scolds him, telling him that copying Yumeko's style is not the solution, and urges him to come up with something truly original that shows off his own talent. On another day, the story shifts when Wakamatsu shows up at Nozaki's apartment, looking anxious and asking for advice. He explains that Yuzuki invited him to the movies, but because of their constant clashing, he is unsure whether he should go. Nozaki, after listening, firmly encourages Wakamatsu to accept, leaving him with little choice but to agree to the invitation. Still worried about how to act on what feels like a date, Wakamatsu starts reading Nozaki's manga for guidance, hoping to learn how to behave. When the day arrives, he meets Yuzuki at the cinema, but the outing quickly turns into a series of frustrating and embarrassing moments. During the film, Yuzuki dominates the shared space without hesitation. She takes over his armrest, grabs his drink, and even eats his popcorn without asking. While Wakamatsu laughs at the film's jokes, Yuzuki bursts into laughter at the tragic moments and the misfortunes of the main character, which makes him start to wonder if there is something wrong with her sense of humor. After the movie ends, the two of them get into an argument over what they just watched. Yuzuki praises the villains for their cleverness, while Wakamatsu grows more and more annoyed, finally shouting at her to stop talking. When he returns home, he regrets having gone in the first place, but later, when Yuzuki casually mentions that she has tickets to an amusement park and is thinking about inviting other boys, Wakamatsu feels a surge of jealousy and immediately insists that she invite him instead, surprising even himself with his reaction. The following day at school, Wakamatsu is still preoccupied with figuring out who the mysterious singer is, whose voice always helps him fall asleep. To solve this, he lurks near the singing club but cannot bring himself to go inside, so he approaches Hori for help. Hori, far more confident, strolls into the club without hesitation, but instead of finding the singer for Wakamatsu, he comes back with a completely different idea, suggesting they put on a musical. This sudden announcement shocks Kashima, who reluctantly admits she cannot sing at all. Desperate to improve, Kashima turns to Yuzuki for help. Yuzuki jokingly says she will only help if Kashima kneels and begs, and to everyone's surprise, Kashima actually drops to her knees, determined to get better. Yuzuki, amused, tests Kashima's singing voice, but the result is so bad that she bluntly tells her she has two choices: quit the musical or start intense training immediately. Kashima chooses to train, so the next day she begins practicing in the singing club while Wakamatsu secretly watches again, only to be horrified by how terrible her singing still sounds. Later, Kashima and Hori rehearse for a play about princes fighting for honor, with Hori playing the lead role. During practice, Kashima behaves unusually, full of joy because Hori has such an important part. As the two rehearse their fight, complicated emotions begin to surface. Kashima holds back because her feelings for Hori stop her from wanting to defeat him, while Hori hesitates because he doesn't want to make Kashima sad by beating her. To break this tension, Hori invites Nozaki to try filling in for Kashima's role, but the plan backfires almost immediately. Nozaki performs stiffly and awkwardly, blaming his bad acting on not having the proper costume. When Hori points out that the costume's being worn by Kashima, Nozaki tries to continue in a plain outfit, but it doesn't improve his acting at all, leaving everyone unimpressed. As a last resort, they call Mikoshiba to step in, and this time the rehearsal goes smoothly. Mikoshiba quickly adapts to the role and performs well, while Hori watches from the audience. At one point, Hori even calls out encouragement to Mikoshiba, which boosts his confidence and allows him to win the stage duel against Kashima. However, this outcome leaves Kashima devastated. She can't believe Hori, the one she admires most, was cheering for her rival instead of her. To make matters more confusing, Kashima begins to notice how flustered and nervous Hori gets whenever he talks to Mikoshiba, and it plants seeds of doubt in her mind about how Hori truly feels. The following day, Hori casually mentions to Nozaki that he has another rehearsal planned, this time with Mikoshiba specifically invited, making it sound like the two are becoming closer. When the rehearsal begins, Mikoshiba tries to hide in another room, hoping to escape the awkwardness, but with Hori right there, it's clear he won't be able to run away and will have to face the scene head-on. A few days later, while Sakura and Nozaki were working together as they usually did, Sakura's curiosity got the better of her and she asked Nozaki more about his editor Ken. Nozaki paused for a moment and then began to share the story of how they first met and eventually became good friends. It had happened over a year earlier, shortly after Nozaki decided to part ways with his previous editor, Maeno, whose constant interference and strange ideas had made working with him a nightmare. But after firing Maeno, Nozaki reached out to Ken, who had ironically been recommended by Maeno himself. At first, their relationship was distant and awkward. Nozaki didn't see Ken as a friend and even admitted he didn't like him much, preferring to keep things purely professional. But things changed after a meeting in which Ken genuinely praised Nozaki's work and showed that he cared about the details and effort that went into each chapter. This sincere interest made Nozaki feel valued for the first time, and over time the two built a strong bond and started working together smoothly. Returning to the present, Nozaki confessed to Sakura that he was struggling to come up with a new idea for his manga. Sakura, always eager to help, suggested that he try something fresh and surprising, something that would make the readers feel unexpected emotions. Taking her advice, Nozaki spent hours drawing drafts of surreal and strange stories, but none of them matched the romantic tone his manga was known for. Sakura urged him not to give up and to focus on the element of surprise. Motivated, Nozaki decided to experiment by surprising Sakura in real life to better understand what surprise felt like. The next day, he tried a series of gestures. At one point, he offered his lap as a bench for her when there were no seats, and at another moment, he randomly presented her with flowers. Sakura found these odd but endearing. But the gesture that truly touched her came at recess, when Nozaki suddenly handed her several delicious homemade meals. Watching her enjoy them gave Nozaki new inspiration, and he quickly sketched out a new story based on that moment. However, when he showed the draft to Ken, his editor frowned and said it wasn't a romance story at all, but more like a cooking manga, which disappointed Nozaki. That evening, heavy rain poured down, and Wakamatsu and Mikoshiba showed up at Nozaki's apartment seeking shelter, while Hori was already there working on a chapter with him. With the rain ruining their focus, Hori decided to cook dinner, while Nozaki quietly encouraged him and then stepped aside so Hori would spend time with the others. Meanwhile, Wakamatsu and Mikoshiba, who had never met before, awkwardly introduced themselves, trying to make conversation. At one point, they turned on the television only to accidentally reveal art supplies and half-finished panels lying around, which made it obvious they all worked on Nozaki's manga, though they quickly acted as if nothing unusual had happened. After dinner, Mikoshima and Wakamatsu thanked Nozaki for the meal, while Hori stayed off to the side and noticed something strange. Nozaki was sitting at his desk, writing furiously. Curious, Hori peeked at the notebook and realized Nozaki was already turning the evening into a story, including specific details about the dinner and even interactions between Mikoshiba and Wakamatsu, as if they were characters in his manga. When Hori saw that Nozaki had added him into the story as well, he grew irritated and complained, but Nozaki only smiled and kept writing. Later, instead of sending everyone home in the bad weather, Nozaki suggested they all stay the night so he could observe them further for inspiration. He asked them to do something interesting instead of just sitting and chatting, but the three ended up talking casually anyway, while Nozaki quietly watched. Before long, the calm atmosphere and soft rain outside made Nozaki drowsy, and he fell asleep at his desk. The others tried to wake him, but their attempts turned into playful bickering about who should do it, until finally all three of them, exhausted from the day, drifted off to sleep as well. One day at school, Yuzuki and her friends were chatting about gifts they had gotten from boys. When Sakura joined them, they asked if she had ever received anything, and she remembered the time Nozaki gave her an autograph. The girls told her it might be better to stop talking to him. But Sakura had been carrying chocolates meant for him since Valentine's Day, showing she didn't want to give up. She never found the right time to give them because Nozaki was always busy and unintentionally avoiding her. Later, Yuzuki and Kushima encouraged her to try again. While searching for Nozaki in the hallway, she bumped into him, dropped the chocolates, and, feeling upset, insisted he eat one. To make up for it, Nozaki offered to grant her a wish, but Sakura only asked for a candy, leaving him confused. That evening, they went to a summer festival together in Yukata. They met Mikoshiba and Kashima, and later Yuzuki and Wakamatsu, though those two were busy elsewhere. Wakamatsu thought Kashima might be Yuzuki's boyfriend and felt down. Sakura ended up alone with Nozaki, who admired how she looked in her yukata, making her nervous. They went to a park with a view of the city to watch the fireworks. Nozaki took pictures from an attraction, and since Sakura couldn't climb in her yukata, he lifted her, reminding her of how they first met at the school entrance ceremony. Watching the fireworks, Sakura admitted she liked him. Nozaki replied that he liked fireworks, which confused her until he clarified again that he liked fireworks, not realizing her meaning. But Sakura still felt happy knowing she could rely on him. On another day, Wakamatsu kept thinking about the guy Yuzuki had been with at the festival. Because he liked her, he didn't want her seeing someone else, especially someone good-looking. He asked Nozaki about it, but Nozaki, surprised, imagined a love triangle between Yuzuki, Wakamatsu, and the mystery guy who was actually Kashima. Without an answer, Wakamatsu later asked Hori, but Hori also didn't know and accidentally compared Kashima to Kashima without realizing it. This was forgotten when Hori invited Wakamatsu on a trip, which he accepted. Kashima then found out and invited Yuzuki, Mikashiba, and Sakura too, and after some thought, everyone agreed. Wakamatsu was amazed at how easily Kashima could convince everyone, even Mikashiba. Curious and jealous, Wakamatsu went to the mall to spy on Kashima, but his spying was clumsy and made Kashima think he was acting strangely. While watching Kashima interact naturally with Yuzuki and Sakura, Wakamatsu felt relieved but also embarrassed by how shy he was compared to Kashima. Yuzuki noticed and asked if he was okay, thinking he looked suspicious, and in a nervous attempt to show he was fine, he held up a bikini he thought would suit her, which embarrassed him even more. He then distanced himself and told Sakura what happened. Later, Wakamatsu told Nozaki that Yuzuki and Kashima were dating, saying he confirmed it at the store by watching them get along. He even drew Kashima for Nozaki, who quickly realized Wakamatsu was talking about Kashima all along. A few days later, the group went on the trip. At the beach, Mikoshiba and Nozaki admired the view and the girls in swimsuits. Nozaki got into trouble with a guard who thought he was photographing the girls rather than the scenery. Later, Nozaki told Sakura some romantic manga ideas, and she admitted feeling a little jealous of those moments. Meanwhile, Wakamatsu noticed how many people followed Kashima, impressed by her popularity. Nozaki and Sakura went into the sea, then Wakamatsu joined, and finally Kashima after getting rid of her crowd. Seeing her still in regular clothes, Wakamatsu asked if she planned to swim like that, and she teased him by saying she had a bikini, making him flustered. Elsewhere, Mikoshiba tried to join girls playing volleyball but missed his chance when another guy invited them to eat. He then went to a beach restaurant to chat with girls but answered their questions in a silly way, failing to connect. Later, Mikoshiba found Nozaki and Sakura again, and they all noticed the beach felt dull. They started watching Wakamatsu awkwardly interacting with Yuzuki and another girl, and they joked about it, making up a love triangle story. Afterwards, Sakura asked Yuzuki to teach her how to flirt. Yuzuki went underwater and then told some boys to swim farther out. When Sakura saw the boys had lost their swim trunks, she rushed to help by finding them, but she couldn't. Kashima found the trunks and gave them to Sakura, who then tried to throw them back to the boys. Unfortunately, she threw them too short and a wave swept them away. Even though it was a mess, Nozaki later used the event as inspiration for a new manga chapter, which he proudly showed to Sakura, leaving her feeling both embarrassed and amused.